Hello everyone, welcome to the session 6 of the subject Procurement and Contract Law. In this session, we will be discussing on the importance of measuring supplier performance, developing them, and an important aspect in today's business world, which is called corporate social responsibility. Measuring performance of a contractor supplier is an important duty of the procurement function as well as the project team. A supplier could have been contracted for a particular project, or they could have been contracted for a BAU, meaning business as usual transactions. But whatever the engagement is, it's the duty of the procurement function as well as the project team to make sure that they continuously measure and evaluate the performance of the supplier in order to achieve two main objectives. The first one being the project or the engagement expectations are met, and the second being developing the supplier by the way of providing feedback and making sure that they develop themselves. In this slide, there are few definitions that I have extracted from management books on what supplier performance evaluation is. The first definition says that SPM refers to the integration of performance evaluation analysis, performance decision, supply incentives, and punishment. The second definition says SPM is the business process that includes the methods and systems used to collect and provide information in order to measure, rate, or rank suppliers on a continuous basis. So if you look at both definitions, the common message is there should be continuous evaluation of the suppliers in order to make sure that they are developed as well as the business objectives are met. From a definition point of view, supplier development could be the process of working with certain suppliers on one-to-one basis to improve their performance for the benefit of the buying organization. The performance of a supplier could be measured and evaluated through so many ways. Usually, organizations, they discuss and agree on few key performance indicators, which are called the KPIs. These KPIs are measured on a periodical basis by the project team or the procurement function to make sure that the supplier has delivered what is expected from them. Some organizations, they have KPI scorecards, and some others might be using KPI dashboards. The usual or the best practice would be the project team along with the steering com team will be meeting the suppliers, could be once in 2 weeks or could be even monthly, and they go through the KPI dashboard to make sure that the supplier has performed as per expectation and they have achieved the KPIs. The dashboard will also show whether the performance is a negative trend or a positive trend. In this slide, I have given you a sample KPI scorecard where a supplier has been measured on few KPIs. The KPIs in this sheet are the cost savings, delivery performance, breakdown response quality, technical support and service, as well as business plan objectives. In this slide, you will be able to see the steps of a supplier development process. The respective process has 5 basic fundamental phases, and they are contract startup, planning and implementation, supplier relationship management, contract and performance management, and at the end, the value discovery. In the contract and startup phase, both organizations will have their high-level discussions to review and define their category strategy. What are the expectations from both parties will be discussed and decided in this phase. When they move on to the second phase, they will be discussing on what are the respective strategies, plans and tactics that they will have to follow in order to meet the respective KPIs. They will come up with detailed plans and they will make sure that their implementation strategies are also linked with the high level strategy. In the third phase, they will be further executing whatever they have planned in their planning phase, and also they will further strengthen their entire communication process within this phase. In the fourth phase, you will be able to see that the buying organization will start measuring and evaluating the performance of the supplier. In this phase only, we will see the buying organization reviewing the dashboard in order to measure the respective supplier. And at the final phase, they will have a set of information on how the supplier has performed, and based on that, the future decisions will be made in order to whether to maintain with the supplier or the contract would be end. So this will be the very high level supplier development process. In this slide, you will be seeing the iceberg concept again, which we have gone through and discussed in our previous sessions. But I am bringing in this concept in this session with a different view. Just imagine an organization who is evaluating and measuring the performance of a supplier will evaluate their performance only based on price, meaning any organization will be expecting that their supplier needs to bring down the respective purchase price gradually, and they will be only focusing on that. But what an organization does not see the other benefits that the supplier will bring on to the organization. So we should make sure that as responsible project managers, that we should not only evaluate and measure a particular supplier based on their purchase price. There should be clear KPIs discussed and agreed, and these KPIs should be measured along with the price. The price is an important factor because based on volume that you all provide to this respective supplier, yes, the purchase price should come down, but that should not be the only factor to measure. In this iceberg concept, we discussed that purchase price is one of the factors that is visible to everyone, but there are so many other benefits that a supplier can bring in to the organization. So when measuring a performance of a supplier, all these benefits needs to be taken into consideration as well. In today's business world, innovation has become a driving force. Every organization are investing their resources and effort to innovate more so that they can stay ahead against their competition. One important factor that we need to understand is that for us to innovate, there will be a certain level of support which will be provided by our respective suppliers. So, it's our duty and responsibility to develop and improve these suppliers on a continuous basis so that they will support towards our innovation plans. Now, we need to understand that as project managers and as procurement members, we have a huge task and a responsibility towards this entire innovation and supplier continuous improvement activities. We need to understand the level of value that a procurement team and a project team can bring onto the table in terms of this subject. For an example, just think about that the organization is trying to come up with a certain product, an innovative product that they will think it's a breakthrough in the marketplace. So they want to seek the market and find the correct partner for this respective product. When selecting this partner, definitely the procurement team and the respective project team will be involved. These two important teams needs to understand the technicality of this entire product, meaning the technical knowledge of the respective product needs to be with the project team as well as the procurement team. It is very important. If not, the technical team who is working on the product will come to an assumption that the procurement team does not understand the technicality and they will be looking only from a commercial aspect. And then the understanding and the relationship will not be that strong, and that will be affecting the entire business plan. So the procurement team and the project team needs to understand the respective technicality. They need to have that technical knowledge and they need to talk the same language. But in parallel, they also need to have that commercial imagination. While talking the same technical language, they need to bring in their respective specialization of commercial models into the entire engagement. Also, they need to make sure that they convince the respective stakeholders that the procurement function and the project team can bring in a positive impact onto the entire project plan. These are few important responsibilities of a procurement function and a project team. So they need to get involved in the entire plan from the beginning so that they will understand what are the innovative plans or the new innovation strategies that the organization is going to have, and they will be supporting from day one. And in parallel, they need to continuously improve their suppliers so that they can support this entire framework, which will give a competitive advantage for the organization in the marketplace. In this slide, I have brought in some thoughts on how a procurement and a project team can influence a respective user division or a product development team at the early stage of a product development plan. The first point could be the early involvement of suppliers in the design process. We have been talking about suppliers as partners. So, when a product development team is working on a new product, the procurement team and the project team, based on their relationship, can bring in suppliers who will help the product development team at the very initial stage. The suppliers will be able to provide their inputs in terms of knowledge, technicality, and market information so that the product development team can use all those information and come up with a solution that will be competitive in the marketplace. The second point could be challenging specifications. We were discussing about the procurement and the project team having the correct technical knowledge in the previous slide. So with that knowledge, they need to always challenge the specifications of the respective product by the product development team. Through my experience, lot of product development teams, they always want to come up with the best product at the highest spec, but sometimes they might miss the commercial aspect and as well as whether that spec will meet the requirement or not. So from a user point of view, procurement team and the project team can always challenge the specification to make sure that the product spec is something that is needed in the marketplace and which will add value to the organization. Also, they can influence the product development team to identify the areas that could go wrong. So we have been talking about risk, which are involved in every business process. And the procurement team and the project team can help the product development team on to correctly assess this risk and to come up with mitigation plans. Also, they can help the product development team to understand all the cost drivers of the entire product plan, and they can train them on how to manage these drivers effectively. Also, they can help or they can introduce other organizations that can help the product development team to come up with this plan effectively. And the last point could be, when a product development team is working on a new product, they will have to work with all the cross-functional teams within the organization. And the procurement and the project team can help them in that area. Measuring the performance of a supplier and developing them is a key responsibility of the procurement team. These two aspects are always interlinked. In a project scenario, the project manager can join hands with the procurement team in order to make sure that they measure performance and develop the supplier so that the supplier can perform up to the expectation. In this slide, I have listed down 9 key steps that a project manager or a procurement person can follow in order to measure performance of a supplier and how to bridge any gaps that are identified. The first and the most critical step would be identifying what are those critical products or projects that needs to be evaluated. Then, based on that, the respective suppliers will be identified. Then, based on their performance, the procurement team and the project team can evaluate them whether they have achieved what was expected from them. In that evaluation, it will be very clear that whether there is a gap between the expectation and the actual performance. There should be a cross-functional team which involves key stakeholders from the buying organization and key stakeholders from the supplier side. And this cross-functional team should evaluate the gaps and see how can they bridge those? The next step would be meeting the top management of the supplier, and the buying organization needs to present whatever the findings from the evaluation, so that top management of the supplier will also understand those gaps, and then they will agree on an action plan on how to bridge these gaps in the future. Both organizations, meaning the buying organization and the supplier, then can agree on few action plans with deadlines and measure them frequently. After measuring them frequently, then the buying organization can determine whether the supplier has improved on their gaps, and if not, to come up with further deadlines and KPIs.